Mindfulness is just paying attention to whatever it is that you're doing when you're doing it. So you're not time traveling into the past and into the future. You're actually having your sip of water or your sip of coffee and not multitasking in your mind. We worry and ruminate because we're wired to do that as primates, but it's not actually helpful. So it's helpful to brush your teeth with your eyes closed, so you're actually only brushing your teeth. You're hearing the sound of the toothbrush. You're feeling the brush on your teeth. You're tasting the toothpaste. All of that is a mindfulness in daily life activity.
This is episode number 554 with Julie Potiker, Mindfulness Methods for Life. Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Weiner. Welcome back to Last First Date Radio, where we believe it is never too late to go on your last first date. And to support you, I wrote 2 books. The first one is called Becoming a Woman of Value, How to Thrive in Life and Love. And this book is for women who really just want to succeed in all areas of life and love. And the second book was just released in February on Valentine's Day, and it's called Choice Points in Dating. And I wrote this book to empower women to make healthier decisions at every stage of dating and relationships, because we can screw it up at every stage and we can also make good decisions. And it really is helpful to really understand where your decisions come from so you can make better choices. And you can find them both on Amazon for Kindle or paperback. This week's tip from the Woman of Value book is practice saying no. Such an important thing to say no to things that don't work for you. And I find that women in particular have trouble saying no. I've actually met a lot of men who say yes way too often too. And so if you tend to have that auto yes, like, oh yeah, I'll do you a favor. I'll say yes to that, even if you haven't really processed it and thought about it. Practice saying no. And before I bring Julie on, I just want to give you an invitation. If you're not yet a member of my amazing Facebook group called Your Last First Date, join us over there. We are really unique as a group for single women. We support you. We don't allow you to just vent and talk about how horrible dating and men are, because that does not help you and it's also not true. So come and join us at Your Last First Date on Facebook. And now for my guest, Julie Potiker. She is a mindfulness expert with extensive certifications and teacher training in a variety of tools and methods, including mindful self-compassion. She has a new book. It's called Snap: From Chaos to Calm. Through her Mindful Methods for Life program offering, she helps other people bring more peace and wellness into their lives. Her first book, Life Falls Apart, But You Don't Have to: Mindful Methods for Staying Calm in the Midst of Chaos, is now available on audiobook. Welcome to the podcast, Julie.
Happy to be here. Happy to meet you.
Happy to meet you too. Had a great discussion with you before we started recording. We have a lot in common. So I'm excited about this whole discussion because mindfulness may not seem like a topic that's relevant to dating and relationships, but it actually is. And because dating and relationships are life, we really need to know how to center ourselves, how to get calm. And when we're in chaos, we make terrible decisions. We don't do our best. And so many people don't know how to get back to a state of self-regulation. So tell us a little bit about how you got interested in this whole topic.
Way back when my now 28, and 32-year-old children were teens, early teens, I was too stressed out and I had words being garbled coming out of my mouth. I went to a neurologist to make sure my brain was okay, and he diagnosed me with stress and recommended mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is, as you know, a really good, solid, evidence-based class that was invented in 1979. I took the class. I thought there's something to this. It was the neuroscience that fascinated me. And so I just started taking more and more trainings. Eventually, Mindful Self-Compassion was created. That was in 2010. The teacher training was in 2014. I jumped at it, and I've been teaching it as well as taking other trainings and developing curriculum ever since. So that's how I got into it. I got into it because I personally was suffering. And then when I saw the tremendous assistance it gave me with my own body, my thoughts, my feelings, my ability to manage my own stuff and show up how would be helpful in the world, I knew that I needed to write books, because you can reach more people with your message with a book than you can with 15 people sitting in front of you. Now, during COVID, there were many more. There were hundreds of people, because I was able to do workshops and everybody was, shut in. But the material that I learned helped me heal, and that's why I teach it.
We learn what we need to know, and then hopefully, if you really love it, you're the best teacher for that, because
Exactly.
You've been there, you've done that, you got the
Exactly.
t-shirt. So for anyone who really doesn't understand mindfulness, could you give us a little context around what it means and how it works?
Sure. So some people confuse mindfulness and meditation, and they're two different things, but I don't blame them, because mindfulness meditations usually run together in sentences. Mindfulness is just paying attention to whatever it is that you're doing when you're doing it. So you're not time traveling into the past and into the future. You're actually having your sip of water or your sip of coffee and not multitasking in your mind. We worry and ruminate because we're wired to do that as primates, but it's not actually helpful. So it's helpful to brush your teeth with your eyes closed, so you're actually only brushing your teeth. You're hearing the sound of the toothbrush. You're feeling the brush on your teeth. You're tasting the toothpaste. All of that is a mindfulness in daily life activity. My morning coffee, the first couple sips, is a mindfulness in daily life activity. Mindful eating, if you really go deep into where did this food come from, and you break down the components of the food and you imagine all the hands that made the food possible until it got to you, and then you look at it and then you taste it, what you're not doing is ruminating and worrying or thinking about the next thing or whatever it is. And all those things that you can do on and off throughout the day are mindfulness activities, and they give your brain a break. And then meditation, a whole nother different thing that I think is essential to our mental health and well-being, is resting your awareness on whatever the meditation is. So it could be your breath, it could be a word, it could be a phrase like, may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live with ease. Those are classic loving kindness phrases. It could be a moving meditation for people that don't like to sit still. So it could be Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, walking meditation, opening up all your sense doors. But whatever that is, you're resting your awareness on a prompt, and then your mind will wander. You'll gently bring it back. It'll wander. You'll gently bring it back. Eventually, your attention will be longer on whatever that prompt is as years pass and you get more adept at controlling your concentration. So that's the scoop with mindfulness, period, and then meditation separate.
That's good. That's a good explanation. I think a lot of people are confused about this. I studied a class in positive intelligence. Have you heard of this?
I have.
And they use a mindfulness tool. You're supposed to stop like 3 times a day and do these mindfulness exercises. And one of them is like focus on something in the distance and then focus your eyes. And then you can sort of blur the vision, focus it sharper, focus on something further. Do the same thing with your hearing. You can focus on sounds that are farther, closer, closer, closer. But you do these for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and even just touching 2 fingers together, your thumb and your second finger, with your feet flat on the ground and closing your eyes can just ground you during the day.
You're resetting yourself is what you're doing.
Such a good thing to do, because so many people just go through their day. They don't stop. They don't get up from their chair. They don't drink. They don't, they're not even aware of their breath. And so resetting is really, really important. So tell us a little bit more about how we can rewire our brains to be more calm, peaceful, more happy.
So what wires together fires together. So when you have a good mood, if you notice that you're having one, or you can create one, so that's two different techniques, right? Let's say you're having a terrible day and you really need and want to change your mood, which is part of the SNAP method that we'll talk about, which is my second book. But the piece of that, the experience-dependent neuroplasticity piece, thank you to Dr. Rick Hansen, who created that course that I'm a graduate of, and all of his fabulous books, Hardwiring Happiness, if your listeners really want to go deep into taking in the good, which is experience-dependent neuroplasticity training. It's noticing you're having a good mood, enriching it and absorbing it, so the neural network that's buzzing, I call them neural bridges, what wires together fires together, goes from a mental state, which is temporary, to a neural trait, which is a permanent brain health. So you don't want to say, how I teach it is like, that's a beautiful sunset, what's for dinner? No, you want to say, wow, look at that sunset. And just for a dozen breaths, not a dozen breaths, a dozen seconds, really take it in, feel it in your body, and you are then creating a new neural network. And the more times you do that, Sandy, during the day, the negative ones get pruned out. So you actually create a happier brain in your default mode network. So it's neuroscience, but it's easy. You just have to notice when something's awesome and just take a dozen seconds or so to acknowledge it. Don't let it just fly out of your brain like a sieve.
So you're either feeling great, or you're seeing something beautiful, you're experiencing something.
Or even remembering something. Like if I'm having a particularly bad day, I'll call up a memory of an awesome moment in order to do that, to shift. And we'll talk about that when I teach you SNAP.
Let's go there.
Because that's in the A. Okay. So I created SNAP as an acronym, as a method to help us snap out of it, basically. Snap out of chaos and into calm. So when I teach it, I have people snap their fingers, and then the S is soothing touch. And soothing touch is its own whole cool thing, because when we place our hands on our bodies where we find it soothing, and I take people through a Simon Says thing, your hands on your heart, your hands on your belly, one of each, cradling your face, hugging your arms, hand in hand, whatever it is, whichever supportive touch place works for you, what will happen is oxytocin and endorphins will get released in your body, because it's the mammalian caregiver response, which is when an infant cries out and gets picked up by the adult, the cascade of feel-good hormones, which are oxytocin and endorphins, gets released in the infant and in the big person. So we can do that for ourselves, which they never knew before. John Kabat-Zinn, when he created the STOP acronym in 1979, they didn't have all this data back then. They didn't have functional MRI machines. They didn't know all the cool stuff that science knows now. So that's the S in SNAP. Immediately, you're down regulating the cortisol and adrenaline that you feel because you're activated by a difficult emotion, right? Then the N, name the emotion. Name it to tame it. I'm sure you've heard that. Feel it to heal it. So you're naming it. Oh, let's pick one. Oh, that's fear, right? Then the act, and you can see I'm doing hand motions, people that are listening to this and not seeing it, I'll explain why I teach it like this, but the act is, what do I need to hear right now? And what do I need to do right now? And the what do I need to hear right now is the penultimate mindful self-compassion curriculum question. And then you tell yourself what you need to hear. So if it's fear, for instance, you might look around and say, actually, I'm safe right now. I have a fear that this may be occurring or that this might happen or whatever it is, but really, there's not a monster chasing me. I'm actually technically safe. And then the second part of ACT is, what do I need to do right now to shift my mood? And this is really an incredible superpower because you will have built a toolbox that's filled with your unique joy list, because I'll have you write down what brings you joy, and then stuff that you never thought of, which is the mindfulness and daily life activities. And you'll choose one of those things to shift your mood. And then the P, which is the last part of SNAP, is praise. And you and I talked before the interview about faith and about religion. So the P for somebody like myself is, I praise myself. I praise my practice. I praise my teachers, and I praise the universe. But if you were a particularly faith-based religious person, you could go all in praising your deity of choice, which is very cool because then it sort of rolls right in. Both of them roll right in, but it rolls right into the gratitude practice, which is another real foundational practice that I can't stress enough how important it is for mental health and well-being.
Yeah, this is great. I love every step of this. It's so clear. And I think that a lot of times when you get so caught up in why me, why am I going through this, you can't even think about gratitude. And I heard a little Tony Robbins thing a couple of weeks ago, and he said 3 things that keep people stuck. One is trying to control the things that you can't control and not controlling the things you can. Another one is not living in the present, but living in the past and the future. Mm-hmm. And the third one is not having a gratitude practice.
Yep.
And wanting what you can't have, but not being grateful for what you do.
Yep.
And those 3 shifts, if people can just stay in the present, control what you can, and be grateful, are huge. And this method of really helping you to process so beautifully, because first you're really calming yourself down, then you're naming the emotion, then you actually get into action. You do something about it, and then you end with gratitude and praise. I mean, it's like you go full circle. Beautiful.
Thank you. I was teaching a different acronym for years that was a good acronym, but it needed an update. And so that's how I came up with SNAP, because the other acronym didn't have soothing touch. And I think soothing touch is brilliant. Yeah. And then we could also talk about the vagus nerve. I mean, all of this stuff is so beautifully packaged, really. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we have more control than we realize, and that if we knew it, we would exercise that control. We just need to remember to practice all of this stuff. We're very powerful creatures, and how we show up in the world and mirror each other, we're responsible for us, right? Emotions are contagious. So, be the good so that you can show up like that and lift up other humans.
Yeah, it's amazing the effect that has on people. I was speaking to a client this morning, and she said that her partner every night would pray to be a better man. Oh. And I said, that's lovely, but what does that mean? And what is he doing about it? It's like, pray to be a better man. Okay, that's great. but nothing's changing because
There's no action steps.
there's no action and there's no clarity. Like it's just this big, vague, be a better man. So when you're really clear, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm needing right now. Is this true? And that's why I, as a dating and relationship coach, find these practices to be so important. And tonight I am teaching the final class, like when we're taping this, of an online dating course that I teach. And the last class, I always share this really beautiful guided meditation that my son created to help with negative thoughts. And there's a lot of negative thoughts that come up when you're dating, because you get filled with self-doubt and you go through all kinds of feelings of rejection, and just to be able to take those thoughts and put them somewhere. And so he created this thing with this portal where you create this like circle and you put your thoughts into it, and it's kind of this gaseous thing, and then you close it up and you make it into this little thing, and you kiss it goodbye. You basically are saying, I'm not my thoughts and my thoughts are not me. And, you kind of watch them sort of dissipate in this little cauldron kind of thing. Yeah. He's great at meditation and yoga and all these practices that he just started doing on his own because he saw the benefits. He's a very highly sensitive person, and he was absorbing all the emotions of everyone around him.
Oh, I've got kids like that. The girls, my daughters, are really empathic. It's painful. They need to learn shields, which they have through the years, and they've got me as their mom. But
right.
Your son might like my podcast is free, and it's guided meditations. They're extemporaneous. So every Wednesday when I teach, for these past 3 years, I record what's coming out of my mouth, and each one has a poem. And then my friend Patty Lane puts them up on my podcast with notes and with music behind them. And it's free for the planet. And every single one of them is some type of loving kindness or metta meditation, because years ago, I read a study that said that loving kindness meditation makes us humans more altruistic. So why not raise the bar of humanity by wishing others well as yourself well, as opposed to just some other kind of meditation?
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts, like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/lastfirstdate to learn more and claim this offer. Another area that we focus a lot on in coaching is forgiveness. Because a lot of people carry the anger of relationships that didn't work out, past partners, and how can I ever forgive them, or don't forgive themselves. And it's just, it's important to do it in a way that's true, not, oh yeah, I'm just going to forgive them.
Well, right. You can't just let stuff go. I teach an entire unit on that. You can't just let stuff go without a method to let stuff go.
Exactly.
And just knowing that, what do they say about anger like that? And it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die or something. I mean, you're really holding stuff inside I keep pointing to my heart. You're really holding stuff inside your heart and mind and soul that's damaging to your immune system. It's damaging to your body.
Yeah. And you can feel it when you talk to people, because they're carrying all this negativity and they're dumping it out. It's like leaking out of them. You just feel it.
It's like vomit. I know.
Yeah.
Now I have to say, I'm with my boyfriend from college. So my husband and I started dating in 1980. So, and I'm still with him. So it's interesting that I'm on your podcast, because I end up having a lot of students that are middle-aged women that have just experienced catastrophic loss in their lives, and they're trying to figure out how to patch themselves back up to launch themselves back out. So now I know who I can send them to. I can teach them all the mindful self-compassion skills, and then I can point them in your direction.
I would love that. Get them all ready for me. So let's talk a little bit more about the self-compassion piece and the forgiveness. If you call it a bust your bra state of being, how do we do that? How do we get in touch with the compassion?
Well, so internal family systems is the unit in the mindful self-compassion curriculum that deals with the inner critic. And it's really the inner critic that causes us so much suffering, because it's that voice that we all have in our heads that talks to us in a really nasty tone usually, and the content's usually pretty nasty too. And so there's writing exercises that have you contemplate and then write. And the purpose of them is eventually to figure out who that voice is. It's one of your primary caregivers when you were a kid. Oftentimes it's the mother, sometimes it's not, but it usually is. And then to figure out what is the purpose of that voice, because usually there's a purpose. You've internalized it. You're grown up now. It's not helpful. And then you write a thank you letter to that voice, because you get in touch with your compassionate voice. And if you don't know what that is, there's an exercise for that, like where you're writing to a dear friend on the same issue, what you would say, because you talk to your friends way nicer than you talk to yourself. That's known. There's science behind that. So it helps you get in touch with your self-compassionate voice. And then you practice calming down. You're retiring your critical voice, and you practice loving yourself. I call myself sweetheart all the time. I went and got a mammogram yesterday, and I was like cheering myself on. I got into the parking lot. I'm like, good job, Julie. I like turned my car off. I'm like, you're doing great. I like had an entire conversation with myself the whole way in there, just to love myself.
It's a scary thing going for that mammogram.
Every year.
Every time.
Gotta do it, right?
Yeah, you go and you don't know what you're going to find out, and your whole life can change. And then you can also be like, woohoo, gratitude.
Yeah. 6 of my closest friends are fine now, fine. But they've all had to go through breast cancer, actual cancer, in the last 10 years. Yeah, 6 of them. And that's how it is for all of us. And luckily, they're all fine now. They're all in the survivor camp right now. But anyhow, so that is the whole inner critic thing. And that's huge, because we need to treat ourselves with the kind of care and love and compassion that we give to others. And if we can't learn how to do that, I think we're kind of screwed, between you and me.
Oh, totally. Totally agree with that one. In that positive intelligence course I was telling you about, we also, they were called PQ reps, positive intelligent reps, those little mindfulness tools. But the other part of the course was all about saboteur and the saboteur voices. And it broke saboteurs down to 10 different categories, between the hypervigilant and the hyper controlling, the people pleaser. Like, it shows up, our saboteurs show up in so many ways.
Yeah.
And I never saw it that way until I took this course, because I had learned about saboteur, gremlin, all this stuff when I was learning coaching. But being able to do this now, I do it with clients, and it's like, oh, your hypervigilant part is coming out. Let's take a look at that. And where did that come from? And whose voice is that? And then learning how to soothe yourself by replacing those voices. And it's amazing. I mean, how many people still carry so much of that inner voice, it's like I had a client who said that flirting felt like being a slut because that was what she heard growing up. And
Aw.
so, yeah. And so you think, well, I have to be really serious when I go on dates because otherwise I'll
Ugh.
be slutty, like those girls in high school. Like how many years
Ugh.
ago was that? Yeah.
Was that
So
her mom or her dad?
mom,
Yeah. Oh, because her
mom,
mom was
mom was,
scared. Her mom was probably scared for her. I
yep,
mean, that's the thing. Usually these voices, when you figure it out, it's some kind of fear,
yep.
right? That the parent had. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just to be punitive. It's like they were actually afraid for your safety, or they were worried that you wouldn't excel, that you couldn't make a living. It was fear-based. And
Right.
underneath that, there was love there. But
Doesn't always feel like it,
it
right?
doesn't always feel like it. No. Wow.
I remember when I started to really understand where all those voices came from, and my mother, one day she said to me, I stayed up all night worrying about you. And I'm like, ew. I don't like that because first of all, I know that's from a place of love, but what she's really saying is I just lost a night of sleep and I don't really trust you to solve your own problems. So I'm taking it on. That's how I interpreted it. And so I don't want her staying up all night. I want her to trust me. And I let her know, like, you can trust me to figure this out. I'm pretty good at figuring stuff out and I appreciate your love, but I'm not going to take it on as now I feel guilty that you stayed up all night. And,
Right.
it's
You
like we
just pile
can,
on more and more baggage.
yeah,
I
exactly.
actually, in my first book, I actually have the actual letter that I wrote in the exercise from the class in 2010. And I was seeing a therapist at that time. And I took the letter into her and she read the thing. And she said, "Oh my God, you wrote this by yourself? Like nobody helped you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did. I did." And
Wow,
it
what a grown
it
up.
was a huge aha for me. And I was a grown-ass woman at the time. I mean, it
Right.
it took me a long time to really unwrap the damage my mom did, and she was a good mom. But
Yeah.
and I pray that I am not damaging my girls. And I'll just say to them, "You'll work it out in therapy when
Right.
you're older." I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah. And that's the truth. I mean, at this point, you've done the best you could. You can make reparations, but it's their work to do.
Mhm.
And we all try to do a little better with each generation, hopefully
Oh, for
break the
sure.
cycles of whatever got passed down.
Yep.
But the awareness, like I became much more aware of when I was going into those kinds of statements. Or I remember when my son decided not to go to college and my friends would call me up and say, that's a terrible idea. And I was okay with it because that worked for him. And he
Mhm.
had a plan. He
Mhm.
wasn't going to just sit home on the couch all day and eat bonbons. I mean, there was a plan, and college isn't the only plan. And for him, it was a good plan not to do it. But it was their fear speaking.
Right.
How will he have security?
I get that because my daughters are both musicians and they both chose different paths. And the not going to college thing was a hard one for me to let go of. I just have to be honest. It was hard. I hope nobody that knows them ever hears this. And I know that they'll never hear this, but that was a practice for me to get comfortable and let go. And I now am, because they're 28 years old. But the first couple years of them not going to college, Hera went, but then she dropped out. She really didn't like it, and it wasn't what she wanted to do. And I had a hard time because I think I was afraid that they wouldn't succeed in life. And I was also embarrassed.
Yeah.
So, and when I got truthful about that, I was like, how gross to be embarrassed. that's kind of gross because they're fabulous people. And they're so smart and creative and interesting. And this actually is their journey and not my life.
Right.
But it took a while to get there. I mean, I had to work on myself and now I'm comfortable.
Well, that's the key. And because, the embarrassment so many times comes from what will other people say? And the fear. I mean, it all comes from a good place. Like you want them to succeed. That's the bottom line.
Right.
And the way that most people have succeeded is by following this certain path. And
Right.
following an uncertain path is scary for anybody, but it's also the right path. And my daughter just quit her job. She just went back to LA with no job. And she's excited about it. And I said, you know what? This is where the big changes happen. And I'm supporting her. I think she did the right thing. I think if she had stayed in this job, it would have been safe and it would have been good money and she would have fallen apart. And sometimes you have to make these hard decisions.
No, I know.
And yeah, my son
I
is a
just
musician.
wonder if I had a mom like me, and as opposed to the mom that I had, what I'd be doing. Because I don't know. My father also didn't want me to be an actress. Both of them were extremely, extremely against me being an actress, and so I became a lawyer. So
That's safe.
yeah.
Yeah. And no, it's the arts are scary for people. I'm an artist. My ex-husband is a comedian. And my kids grew up in an unconventional home where we never expected them to be anything but creative. Like if they had become lawyers and doctors, it would have been shocking. And so I raised my kids to really explore who they were and to really be self-expressive. And it's taken interesting paths. So my son, who's a musician and artist, is on his path. My oldest was a fashion designer who was on a fast track to create a whole line of her own and have fashion shows at 16, and then
Wow.
dropped the whole thing, became a mom, ended up as a pastry chef, and now she's doing calligraphy.
Wow.
So she's got her own path. And then the youngest is also an artist, but never pursued it. She's more into music management. So they're all in some creative fields. And I just try to give them reality checks about like, how are you going to make money doing this?
That's the fear.
Yeah.
That's the fear. That's the fear that I have. Although the other night, my one daughter, Kara, her band was opening for a very popular band, and there were 2,500, mostly teens in the audience. A lot of them had their parents. I talked my way up into like a little VIP platform so that I wasn't like in the mosh pit because there weren't seats at this place. And I got to have the ecstatic experience of seeing her in her success, in her, I usually show up and it's like at a bar that there's a couple hundred people. This was just fantastic. Moon Daddy, thousands. And then the kids rushed the merchandise table. They bought her vinyl. Kids are buying vinyl now. She presses vinyl, which is cool. She knows how to make actual records. She's like one of 6 women in the world that does this. I know we're way off topic here. But
cool, though.
Like the teenagers had her like signing autographs. It was, she's where she needs to be.
Yeah.
This is her joy and her love and her life. And if she would have gone to college, I don't know if she'd be here right now because she's been working her way up these last 10 years.
Yeah, which is beautiful. And in some ways, her being a performer is part of your dream.
Well, yeah, but I don't have the voice. I don't have I have perfect pitch. I was an arts camp kid, but I don't have half the voice that either of my girls have. One of them is like rhythm and blues and pop. And the other one, the one that was just at this big venue, is like kind of indie electronic. She sounds sort of like She's got a very deep voice and she sounds sort of like David Bowie, or I don't know. She's just extremely cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, you found a way to regulate yourself and to have compassion for yourself so that you could allow your children to follow who they needed to be. And
Yeah.
even though it was hard, and I think this is, to segue back to dating, relationships, we often come in and we want things to go our way, and we want the person to be something that they're not, or we're disappointed but we don't express it. And all of these tools help us to get centered with who we are and what we need, and be able to be calm enough to be able to have these conversations. And so, do you have any final words of advice for people who want to go on their last first date, but they're like, they need some help with all of this emotional regulation? What would you suggest?
I would suggest them to just remember to snap, soothing touch, name the emotion, act, and praise. And they can snap 15 times a day if they need it. And some kinds of suffering require many, many, many tools, one after another in the toolbox. Like if taking a walk only helped for a little while, and now it's nighttime and you feel crappy again because your date was terrible, maybe taking a bath would help, or listening to music while you take a bath and light a candle and have bath salts. Like really doing a spa thing for yourself would help, or calling a friend, or I mean, you'll see what's in your toolbox. You might have to use 10 or 12 tools in a day to keep shifting yourself out of your funk, but something will work because it works for grief.
Which is also important because many of the people listening to this podcast are grieving. They have lost a spouse, and it's not a clear path to work through grief. It comes, it goes,
I have a
it's
big
triggered.
chapter on grief in the book. I do. I've written so much about grief, and I did it all before actually becoming a certified grief educator, which I am now. But I wouldn't have written that stuff any differently. So
yeah, it's all just, we're all going to have feelings. We are humans. We have feelings, and knowing how to work through them, to have tools in your toolbox to be able to go from chaos to calm, is really the key. And so tell us one link where our audience can find you.
Mindful Methods for Life is my website, and everything is on there. The blogs, the podcasts, interviews. There's a library on there. So it's not just my books, but it's all my teachers' books, their websites, their newsletters. Anything that I have found to be helpful is on that website.
Awesome. So we'll have that link and all the other links on the show notes. And thank you, Julie. This has just been an enlightening conversation. It's such important work that you're doing, and I really appreciated talking to you today.
Me too. I loved hearing about your kids, and I'm really glad you're doing what you're doing because I'm going to be able to send people to you.
Great. I would love to have people who are already in the mindfulness method when they come, because that is so much of what I start with. So thank you. I appreciate it. And I will definitely use you as a resource as well.
Great.
So thank you, everybody, for listening. If you love our show, please give us a rating and review, 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really, really helps. And as always, here's to your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.